The Uncharted Territories is a podcast about seeing the unseen in the world of matter. Join me, Shara Prophet, the Mind Magic Coach, and my partner, astrologer Scott Tejerian, as we take an esoteric look this season into the life, death, and afterlife of a variety of celebrities and public figures who lost their lives prematurely or unexpectedly.
Hi there, Shara.
Hey, Scott.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you today?
Doing well. Very excited to be here with you as always. It's always an honor to be in your presence. I'm very grateful to be here with you. I'm very excited about what we're going to discuss in this episode. We've already discussed the son of this individual, Brandon Lee, and now we're discussing Brandon Lee's father, Bruce Lee. And wow, Bruce Lee. I mean, to say that Bruce Lee is an icon is almost an understatement.
It's an understatement, for real. Yeah, really it is.
He's like a legend. He's like a deity. I mean...
He's a master.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I went really deep on the Bruce Lee research. I read Matthew Pauly's book, which I highly recommend to anyone who's interested in Bruce Lee. It's called Bruce Lee, A Life. It's over 600 pages.
Okay.
It goes from start to finish, all the details. He conducted hundreds of interviews with various people that were involved with Bruce Lee at various points of his life. In addition to that, I watched, I think, all the recorded interviews that Bruce Lee had done. There's not many. He did a couple radio interviews, a couple in-person interviews. They're on the internet. It's very fascinating to watch him speak. I watched the audition that he did for the Green Hornet, or before he got the Green Hornet, when he was being introduced to Hollywood. I watched all 5 of the films that he did as an adult, one of which wasn't completed because he had died, but The Big Boss was his first starring role in a feature-length film, and then Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon, Enter the Dragon, and then Game of Death was the partial film that was not completed. But wow, I learned so much about Bruce Lee. Just a fascinating individual. I mean, I thought that this was a mixed martial artist fighter who became an actor, but from reading the book, I came to realize that he was actually an actor who got in trouble a lot as a kid, got into a lot of fights as a kid, and gravitated into the mixed martial arts to learn how to be a better fighter, and then became a teacher of the mixed martial arts, and then through that ended up transitioning back into the film industry, but in Hollywood, and then later back in Hong Kong. But he was a child actor in Hong Kong. So just, I want to hear. Okay, let's just get started. Tell me about your introduction with him. And then I'll get into all the astrology stuff, because his chart is, of course, mind-boggling to me. And it's very obvious. It's so fun to go through this book and watch the films and then just really see how it all translates into the astrological alignments. But tell me.
Okay. And I'm glad that you've done that extensive research, because I have done hardly any research.
Yes. And for those of you who haven't heard Shara and I on our podcast before, the way that we work is Shara, she doesn't do any research. She wants to stay completely untainted.
Untainted. I don't want a whole lot of influence. Sometimes I will double check stuff that's coming in just to make sure I'm not like
completely off target.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll do that, but otherwise I like to be totally clean. So whatever's coming in is what's coming in. And then when we get together, you're like the compass.
I'm the opposite side of the spectrum here. I'm doing a ton of research, but I am connecting what I research to what I see astrologically. So that's how we do it. Yes.
All right. Well, let's see.
Yes.
Let's see what I came up with, if it matches what you came up with.
Okay, cool.
So, okay, theme for Bruce Lee. We like to do his life's theme. was dedication.
Dedication, without question. Wow, that's perfect.
Yeah, dedication to life, to family, to his art form, to business, to everything that makes up the earthly realm, you know, very dedicated to that. I wanted to talk to him before I talked to Brandon, but he didn't want to come forward.
Brandon came forward first.
Brandon came forward first.
So we went with Brandon first.
We did, yes.
And then
Brandon actually brought his dad in.
Oh, wow. I'm getting the chills right now.
Then his dad finally came forward, and it was like this switch off. Like, okay, now it's your time to tell your story. So that was very interesting. And when he came forward, he was wearing all black. He kept switching between two black outfits. It was between like his, I guess, martial arts uniform. I don't know what to call it. Well, I don't know the correct name.
It's so funny you say that because when I think back to these Bruce Lee movies, particularly Fist of Fury, where he's wearing all black.
Okay.
And he's going into like these karate dojos. That movie's all about his Sifu, his master, is died, and he comes back and he's devastated that his master died. He doesn't know how he died. He knows that there's something up. He ends up finding out that the Japanese had poisoned him. And so he goes into this Japanese dojo. They're wearing the white, as you know, like the karate uniform with the belts and everything, and he's wearing the all black. So that was his kind of thing.
Okay.
He would wear the all black.
Okay.
I'm not really sure exactly what that meant, but it was different. Yes.
I don't know. He came in with that uniform on, and then it would switch to like black jeans and a black t-shirt. So I don't know why it kept switching up that way. It just did. He never expounded on that. I'm wondering.
I can explain it astrologically.
Okay.
I can tell.
Yeah. Please do.
Well, okay. So Bruce Lee was born with the sun in the 12th house. The 12th house is the final sign. It carries the weight of the 11 previous signs. And when I think of wearing all black, I think of like Johnny Cash. He's a Pisces, like a 12th house Pisces. So he feels the weight of everyone around him, the pain, the suffering.
I love Johnny Cash.
Yes.
Huge fan.
And so that's why they wear the black. So Bruce Lee had that too. He also was born with 4 planets in Scorpio, the deepest, darkest sign. So the moon, Venus, Mars, Mercury, the planet of the emotions, the planet of relationships, the planet of action, and the planet of communication were all in Scorpios. So to say Bruce Lee was intense, again, would be an understatement. That's the most intense sign. I also view that sign as like the shadow side, the dark side. So yes. Okay,
well, that explains a lot. And now I'm kind of feeling like it's a representation of his elevated part, which is in the martial arts uniform, and then the more human side of him with the t-shirt and jeans, but both representing that darkness, that heaviness, you know, because there's truth and power in both. You know, people talk a lot about the color black, but black is a very powerful energy, you know, to use. This is where we manifest from the darkness, you know. Light comes in later, but, you know, so that makes a lot of sense the way you broke that down. Okay.
That's where the magic happens.
That's where the magic happens.
And Scorpio's the sign of magic.
Yes, absolutely.
So there you have it.
Yep. Okay,
so he came in wearing all black. And then what did you do to invite him in? Or was the invitation already there because you had invited Brandon?
Yeah. Well, it was, I invited him in first.
And then Brandon came first.
But he didn't want to come in.
Right.
And then, but now I know it was because he wanted to give that space to his son to let him come tell his story and express himself. And then Dad comes in kind of like a supporting energy, you know, like kind of just back in the corner, just waiting and letting his son be the star.
Absolutely.
Kind of, you know, that was kind of their dynamic, you know. I mean, even though Bruce passed over when Brandon was young, there was still kind of this shadow hanging over Brandon and his dad's stardom and things like that. So,
but that wasn't what Bruce wanted. He wanted his son to to shine on his own.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think he was giving him that space in this instance, kind of supporting him in that way.
Absolutely.
And so then another thing that came in is this green, red, and gold dragon. Okay. And it came through as him in his spirit form. Lately, the energies, the spirits that I'm talking to are now starting to show me their spirit form. That wasn't happening in the previous ones, but now they're starting to show me their spirit form. So that's interesting. We'll see how that all pans out as we move forward. So when I asked him, what does this dragon represent for you? He said that it's a representation of being quick, strategic, fiery, hidden, and ferocious.
Quick, strategic, fiery, hidden, and ferocious.
Yes.
Okay.
Because when we think about, if anybody out there has ever worked with dragon energy, I work with dragon energy quite frequently in magic and things like that. Dragons have the ability to shapeshift. So they can shift into a human form. They can shift into a flying dragon. They can shift into gargoyles sometime. They can shift into many different things, and they are really good at hiding. And if you want to connect with the dragon, then you have to do some work to do that, unless you already have like some dragon energy in your lineage somewhere, in your spiritual lineage somewhere. Some of us have dragons that are just kind of watching over us already, and they're already there ready to introduce themselves. But usually you have to prove yourself to them.
To call on that dragon energy. You have to prove
see
yourself.
them, to communicate with them, and then for them to agree to work with you.
Well, would it mean anything that Bruce Lee, being born in 1940 at 7:12 a.m., that's the year of the dragon.
Interesting.
And the hour of the dragon.
Okay, that makes perfect. I didn't know any of that.
Yes.
So that makes sense.
So
okay.
It says in the book that the day that he was born, like his dad, all of his friends were like, wow, that's such a fortunate birth for your child.
Interesting.
Because to be born in the year of the dragon and the hour of the dragon, that's super powerful energy. Now, when you talk about hidden or shape-shifting and that sort of energy, that is Scorpio, the scorpion. So having the emotions, the mind, relationships or the senses, and the action-oriented energy all in the sign of Scorpio gives that shape-shifting power, especially with Mars, the god of war, which is the planetary ruler of Scorpio in his astrological code. So that's where I see that shape-shifting, intense, hidden energy.
Yeah.
The fire quality comes from, he's a Sagittarius sun and a Sagittarius rising. So Sagittarius is the archer. So I think of like a flaming arrow. It's like breathing fire, throwing fire.
Yeah.
That's like a dragon.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And he knew he was a Sagittarius. I heard him mention that. Somebody asked him in an interview, he's like, when were you born? He's like, November 27th, 1940, Sagittarius. And I love that because Bruce Lee was somebody who talked about all knowledge is self-knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was really important for him to know himself, and it didn't surprise me that he knew that he was a Sagittarius.
Interesting.
So, yes.
Okay. So we're on the right track then.
Oh, yes. This is
all
fun.
Right. Okay, cool. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Bruce's childhood. Are we ready to get into that?
Let's get into it.
All right.
Let's get into it.
So as we know, Dad was an opera singer, which I find
a famous Cantonese opera singer,
which I find absolutely intriguing because I studied opera music and was trained classically. So I'm like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. And also an actor. And Bruce was saying that his dad was strict, but very loving and very kind and very hardworking. Was a risk taker. I mean, you kind of have to be a risk taker if you decide you're going to be an opera singer. Well,
so the story of his dad being an opera singer is his dad grew up super poor.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the fourth of 6 children.
Mm-hmm.
Family was very, very poor. When he was, I'm not sure at what age, but a child, very young, he was heard by another Cantonese opera singer, famous opera singer, who heard Bruce Lee's dad singing the daily specials outside of this restaurant, and basically took him under his wing to be his protege. And from there, he was trained to be a Cantonese opera singer.
Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing.
So it wasn't so much like it was a choice or he even knew. It was just like this was an opportunity, and it was way better than
what he was doing or wasn't doing at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So he says that he was always working on new projects. This is within him. This is what's coming from within. So this may not have been something that he was public with or even talked about, but Bruce is showing me what was happening internally with his father.
Mm-hmm.
That he would place self-imposed limitations, beliefs on himself, and that would sometimes thwart all of his hard work and all of the things that he was, pouring himself into. Because there was some, even though he was very talented, there was still this self-doubt sometimes about how good he really was. And even if it wasn't particularly related to his art or his career, they were still this self-limiting type of belief. And it makes sense because if he did come from a very poor beginning, that kind of it trains the brain for some self-limiting belief systems to take root, especially if you haven't done any work to clear it, you know?
Sure, absolutely.
So even though he was this amazing, successful artist, there's still this underlining root of, am I really good enough?
Totally.
Do I have what it takes? And so Bruce said that this was something that would hold him back, even if he was successful. See, I think people misconstrue success with being healed. You know what I mean? You could be extremely successful, but it doesn't mean that you don't feel something or that you don't put some sort of like stop in your process.
Yes.
So this is what was coming through.
That makes total sense in terms of he grew up poor. He became successful.
Mm-hmm.
He went to the United States and toured around the United States. That's why Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he came back, when they went back to Hong Kong, they were under Japanese rule for like 3 years and 8 months.
Okay.
And that wasn't a pleasant time for the Chinese people in Hong Kong. His dad was able to carve out a living during this period because apparently the Japanese were big fans of the Cantonese opera.
Mm-hmm.
So he was able to make like a bag of rice every week to feed the 15 mouths that he had to feed, or 13 mouths, because Bruce Lee had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. They also lived in the house with his 5 cousins. They were Bruce Lee's dad's brother's children. His dad's brother, his uncle, Bruce Lee's uncle, had died. And so Bruce Lee's dad was taking care of 6 kids, his mom and his wife. So, I mean, it's like 13, 14 mouths to feed.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's a lot of pressure on one person to provide for that many people. Now, the doubts also came about, and this was interesting to me as well, because the father in an astrological code is usually indicated by the 4th house placement. Sometimes it's the 10th house. But to me, this is very clear that it is the 4th house in Bruce Lee's, because Bruce Lee's 4th house is in Pisces. Pisces is the sign that represents the fantasy realm, and his father was a part of the fantasy realm. Pisces also represents drugs and alcohol, and his dad was an opium addict as well. So using the opium indicates a need to escape the reality. So even though he's super successful as an artist, and he owned like 4 apartments that he was renting out in Hong Kong, still using drugs.
Yeah,
to
that explains
escape
a lot.
Something.
That explains a lot. Yep, that explains that inner turmoil, that inner stopping of not fully allowing himself to like reach his full potential. honestly, because potential could have been a spiritual ascension that he needed to experience that he wasn't allowing himself to because maybe he didn't have time or thought he didn't have time because he was working so hard to maintain a family. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Bruce also said that his dad, again, would hit these tower moments. And so in the Rider-Waite tarot deck, the tower indicates fresh start, starting over, something crashing down, burning down. It doesn't always have to be something bad. It's just a restart. It's just like, okay, this isn't working, or this worked, and now it's time to start something all over again, But he would hit these tower moments, and he would have to constantly kind of like hit that reset button. But again, this is internally. This is not...
This is how he was experiencing his father?
Well, this is him seeing his father from the other side
From
now.
the other side, okay.
Him understanding now
what his father was going through.
What his father was going through.
Okay.
So this is what he was showing me about his childhood, pretty much, which would also explain his anger as a child. Bruce's anger as a child. Even though his household was loving, his parents were very loving to him. Like I didn't get any abuse or anything like that. I didn't pick up anything like that.
Sure.
However, parents can transfer energy to their children.
Yes.
Through the womb, as well as in regular life in the household.
Yes.
So if his dad was already having this inner turmoil going on within him, there is a transfer of energy that takes place, especially from parent to child.
Well, and astrologically speaking, that anger, the anger comes from the alignment of Mars, the god of war in Scorpio, squaring off with Pluto, the god of death in Leo. This is what's occurring in Bruce Lee's astrological code. Okay. The god of death squaring off with the god of war. And remember, when you square off with somebody, it's going to be a fight. Yeah. So he had this raging turmoil within himself between the god of death and the god of war. The god of war in Scorpio, the god of death in Leo. Leo is the lion, fixed fire. Scorpio is the scorpion, fixed water, both fixed, strong alignment, but fire boils water, water extinguishes fire. And the scorpion and the lion are two creatures that don't back down from anyone or anything. So this is a big part of what drove Bruce Lee. This is a big part of that dedication. When you have the god of war and the god of death in alignment with each other, it represents an incredibly powerful will to the point where it's like, you want to stay out of this person's way when they get angry because they will break a hole in the wall.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, that ties into the ferociousness of his dragon energy.
And he talked about this in his interviews too. Because he's such a charismatic and charming individual. Yeah. But he's like, oh, I have a vicious temper. I have a horrible temper. And so, yes. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that in your code. Yeah. And I can also see the charm too.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay.
Does he talk about his mom?
A little bit. His focus was mainly on his father for some reason. Okay. Mom's energy came through very sensual. Very slinky almost, kind of, I don't know much about his mother because he didn't really talk that much about her. He was mainly focused on his dad, and I'm feeling like there's this like generational thing happening with the Mills, so, like this generational tie. You know what I mean?
Sure, I understand.
I feel like that was more prominent in the readings with the two of them.
Because it was interesting for me to look at the 10th house, which is what indicates the mother energy. His 10th house is in Virgo, which is very organized, very analytical, very critical. And from reading the book, it seemed like his mom was that way. And his mom, first of all, came from the dad from the poorest of the poor. The mom was from the wealthiest family in Hong Kong. Right. But at the same time, trauma in that line.
She was adopted.
Well,
right?
no.
I thought she was adopted.
We're not sure who her mother was. We know that her mother was an English woman.
Okay.
But there's no record of who this woman was.
Okay.
Her father was one of the wealthiest people in Hong Kong, the second wealthiest person in Hong Kong. His older brother was the wealthiest person in Hong Kong. They both descended from a Dutch Jewish individual who had like 13 concubines.
Okay.
And then her dad also had 13 concubines, but she was raised by somebody who wasn't her mother because the person who gave birth to her was not one of the concubines, and she was an English woman.
Okay.
So Bruce Lee's mom was, I think she'd be half English, 1/4 Dutch Jewish, and 1/4 Han Chinese. So Bruce Lee was 5/8 Han Chinese with his mom and his dad being the parents, and 1/4 English and 1/8 Dutch Jewish.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
When Bruce was sent to America, according to this book, she gave him $100 and said, "Don't come home until you've made something of yourself, or unless you've made something of yourself." And the dad didn't even go to see him off because apparently there's something in like the Chinese tradition or superstition that the father shouldn't be there when the son goes off.
Okay.
And so I just thought that's kind of harsh. Your mom saying like, "Don't come back here."
Yeah.
That's very critical. They were very disappointed in the fact that he was always getting into trouble. But then there was also the fact that he was going to be 18, and if you want to keep that American citizenship, then you need to register for the draft, as all 18-year-olds had to do at that point in time. So that's why he came to America.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, her energy was present, but it was very sensual. It was very, very feminine, but kind of standoffish a little bit, I guess you could say.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so that was about as much as I was able to tap in to her, but he just kept coming back to his father.
She was very rebellious to marry Bruce Lee's father.
Okay.
Because someone from her class level,
right,
stooping down to be with this Cantonese opera singer is like, no, you're not with that level of person or that class or whatever. But she didn't care. She's like, no, she heard him sing and was like, that's my man.
Yeah. Well, that explains a lot. Like she comes in very sensual. So if that's what she was led by, if that's what she the senses, and so that's music. Where she came in, in that energy. But she was very, not standoffish in a rude way, but just kind of standing back, the masculine energy in the family to kind of come forward. Okay. That's what I was picking up on for her.
Cool.
Yes. But overall, he says that parents were loving to him. There wasn't any, like I said, any kinds of abuse or anything. I didn't pick up on any of that. Yeah. Maybe some levels of strictness, which can tie into their culture and can also just tie into the times as well, like a different time. And he kind of needed it. You know what I mean? Yes. He needed somebody who was going to be strict with him because he was a little wild thing.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So.
Well, and let me just say about this, the wild thing, he had a nickname as a child, Never Sit Still. That was what they called him, Never Sit Still. And when he was born at 7:12 a.m. At that moment, the sun was just rising along the horizon. So when someone is born, when the sun is just cresting over the horizon, that is going to be somebody with an exceptional personality. The sun is the giver of light, life, and vitality. And the ascendant, what's rising right there, that represents your personality. Yeah. So he had the sun shining on his personality. That was his urge to be playful and exuberant and having fun and maybe being too much for some people at some times. And that's also why he was this child actor. He acted in, I think, 23 films. The first time he was on film, he was, I think, 4 months old.
Wow.
In a Hong Kong film.
Wow.
Yes. His dad didn't want to put him in it. Didn't want him to follow that path. But an actress friend of his said, "Can I use your son in this film?" He was playing a girl in his first role. But apparently there's this Chinese tradition that when somebody asks you for help, you can't say no.
Yeah.
And so the dad was like, okay. And so Bruce Lee was on film before he could walk.
Interesting.
Yes.
So he was basically born to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Really.
Exactly.
Like,
but it's so funny to look at it, like, from the fact that, like, the sun was rising at that point in time. And that's why he has so much charisma.
well, the other thing that started coming in when you started talking about where the sun was when he was born is the energy of Lucifer, the the morning star, Venus, like that energy of being highly charismatic, shining bright, illuminated, having an elevated mindset and everything like that, and also being very playful and aesthetically pleasing to the eye. These are all of the qualities of the Luciferian energy. So that came through, and who knows? I mean, I might have to tap in a little bit more with that. Who knows? Lucifer might have been a part of his spiritual team. You find that with a lot of people who have great success and just have this charisma about them, and they've done very well in the entertainment industry. Usually they will have that kind of energy around them. I mean, that's why Hollywood has that Luciferian energy in it, because it's about that.
I know you've said this before, but Lucifer would be the ruler of Hollywood and of entertainment.
Yeah.
That's Lucifer's bag right there.
Absolutely.
Is the starstruck sort of music,
beauty,
film,
aesthetic, illusions, lights.
That's all Luciferian energy.
That's Luciferian energy.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And a little bit of a trickster energy too, if you don't know how to work with them.
and that's also Hollywood.
That's Hollywood.
Right? I mean, like,
it's illusions.
It's illusions. Exactly.
Yeah. So,
but that's funny, because that's something that Bruce Lee had trouble with when he first got involved in Hollywood. He was doing the Green Hornet, and the stuntmen, they were like, this guy's like trying to really hit me and stuff, and like they were trying to show him, like, you got to slow down, and you throw the punch, the person you're trying to punch is like 3 feet away from you, but if they move at the right time as you're throwing the punch from the angle, it looks like you're really hitting them. And so Bruce didn't like that. And so they let him do it his way, but then they showed him what it looked like on film, and you couldn't even see what Bruce was doing because he was moving so fast that it didn't even look like anything was really happening. So he had to learn how to be the trickster on film. But then later on, when he was doing his films that he was starring in, some of those fight scenes, he was coordinating them, and they had real contact.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the other side of this is that, yes, Lucifer energy is tricksterish, has that trickster energy, but also it's very enlightening. Also, that energy can be used to help you find the truth of who you really are, too. So
that was a big thing for him.
Yes, absolutely. So if he was operating in that elevated truth already, then he did have to learn his other side. He needed to learn the trickster side as well. It's good to know both. You know, it's good to, because sometimes you have to pull out, the trickster part of yourself. But that's the beauty of working with that energy, is that it can really assist in helping you identify the truth about yourself if you are lost in that matter, and then also help strengthen your ability to influence and manipulate when you need to.
So I'm hearing a couple different things here. When I think of the trickster, or I think of magic or manipulation, those are all Scorpio traits right there. And so again, his emotions, his mind, his senses, and his action were all in Scorpio. The truth, when you're talking about the truth, that's that Sagittarius energy. Sagittarius rising, the essence of his soul, Sagittarius sun, his identity. Sagittarius is the truth. It's like when you pull back on that arrow, the archer, which is the symbol for Sagittarius, and you let go, it's going to tell you the truth. Yeah. If you're going to hit the target or not. Yeah. That's it. Yep. So, and Bruce Lee was somebody who was always saying, or at least I heard him say it once in an interview, he's like, the importance to honestly express yourself. To honestly express yourself. That's what he was all about. Honestly expressing himself.
So he had to learn the other side of it.
That's right.
Yeah. So yeah. Thanks, Lucifer, for coming in. He always comes in at the right times.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Bruce's relationships.
Okay.
Yes. Now, okay, so in the beginning, when I started doing this with him, I did look up his wife, and I looked that up, and immediately from what I was reading, everything was like peaches and cream and unicorns and rainbows, right? Immediately I was like, I don't know about that. Like, this doesn't seem right. Like, it seems like there's something not being said here. So when I sat with him, then he kind of brought it all up, and I'm like, oh, I see.
So how did that happen?
Okay. So basically, he talks about...
Now, does he just come forward and tell you, like, what is happening here?
Okay. So it just comes out, because I asked him about the relationship between him and his wife. And immediately what comes in is that at some point he thought about leaving his wife for another woman, this other woman, this woman, a woman in particular, not all of them, but just this one. In his words, he said, I came back to reality and decided not to leave her. Okay. However, wife knew about this.
Okay. Does he say who she is, or
who the other woman was? At first he did not.
Right.
At first he didn't.
But then you went back.
I went back and got a little bit more information, and we'll get into that in a minute. But wife knew about the affair. Okay. And he said that he told her, and they decided to work on their marriage and just kind of start fresh. But this other woman was his soulmate. His wife was more of a partnership, like a divine right partnership. This was going to be the thing that supported him in his endeavors, supported maintaining a healthy, loving household, because his wife was also an elevated being. So she was able to understand this connection that he had with this other woman. So I didn't see any like bad fighting between them. I did see the heartbreak in it, but even from the heartbreak, she's expressing herself from like this elevated place of understanding what that means. She's taking
the high road.
She's taking the high road, but it's not even a choice that she made. It was just kind of a, okay, I get that. I don't know. Like, she's a better woman than I am. That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the tone from the book is that she was just so supportive.
Very supportive.
Always supportive.
Yeah.
And at one point during Bruce's downtime in Hollywood, when he was really struggling to get a script made that he'd been working on for years, and then he had a horrible injury to his back,
right,
lifting weights, and he was like bedridden for months. His wife went and got a job, and that was like the biggest like sort of shame for Bruce Lee, was like, my wife is working, like, no, that's like, but she was like, no, that's what I'm gonna do, because that's what our family needs.
Exactly.
And she wasn't like complaining about it or anything, just was like, I'm doing this for our family.
being a real woman, being like a human being.
Yes.
Like, dude, we got bills to pay.
Exactly.
We don't have time for like, putting on a good face. We got kids. We got to eat. We have bills. You're rushed up. I know you got me when you're good to go.
Exactly.
But I'm going to do this right now. And that's what I mean by partner.
Mm-hmm.
She was a divine right partner.
Yes.
Wasn't necessarily a soulmate, which honestly, like, I suggest people find you a divine right partnership if you want it to really like be a healthy situation. Because soulmates are great, but soulmates can sometimes, and twin flames, they can sometimes come with a lot of baggage because they're reflecting back to you who you are. And if it's not healed, it can be a very tumultuous situation, which is what the soulmate connection was between him and this woman, who we are now finding out is Betty Ting-Pei. Is that
Ting-Pei.
Betty Ting-Pei.
Betty
Okay.
Ting-Pei. Yes.
So their connection, it needed to be explored. This is what he's saying. This connection needed to be explored. And he was also very aware that pretty much what I just said, just because a person is your soulmate, it does not mean that you're supposed to be in partnership with them. They're there to teach you something and help you recognize some things about yourself. So they had this like amazing connection that was, pretty crazy, hard for him to shake. And what I'm finding also is that he was also getting some tension headaches from this as well because of overthinking. Overthinking about this situation, kind of going back and forth in his mind between should I go, should I stay? And then even after deciding to stay, there was still this, well, what would have happened if we were together type of a thing. And feeling a lot of guilt about not choosing this woman. But at the same time, understanding that this was the better decision was to be with his family, to stay with his family.
Yeah, it sounds like a tough position to be in.
Pretty much.
They do allude in the book to, first of all, when he first met Betty Ting-Pei, Linda was there, his wife.
Okay.
It was just a casual, like, random meeting at a hotel bar. And then there's multiple people in the book that do comment on the connection that he had with her, the magic you could see between the two of them. But at one point they did break up, and she attempted suicide and had to have her stomach pumped from a bunch of pills at the hospital. But then they ended up getting back together probably like 6 months later, shortly before the end.
Yeah.
So
that ties back into I don't want to use the word toxic, but the heaviness in being with someone who's a twin flame or, has that soulmate. And I'm not saying all soulmates and all twin flames are like toxic and bad. I'm not saying that.
No.
But it does carry, it's like this heaviness of the connection. It's just like,
I can see the tension between Bruce and Betty Ting-Pei, their astrological codes. I'm not sure what time she was born, but she was born right on the cusp of Pisces. And Pisces makes a really tough connection with Sagittarius, which is what Bruce is. She was born with the moon and Mars in Aquarius, which squares off with Bruce's energy in Scorpio. So you can see why there's this attraction there.
Gotcha.
But it's also like there's good heat and then there's dangerous heat that comes with that connection.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was very tumultuous might be too much of a intense word. I don't think it was tumultuous, but it was very heated, passionate, and something that he wasn't quite able to get from his wife, but his wife was supportive, was a safer option. Safe.
He knew he could count on her.
He knew he could count on her. And it just made sense for his career, his family. I mean, it just made sense. A man like this needs some stability. And so then that's not to say that he wasn't deeply in love with his wife. He was,
for sure.
But...
And there is a quote in the book where this American actress, who is also Chinese, I believe, is like really being like the older sister, getting on Bruce about everybody knows what's going on with you and this woman. You know, like, you have a wife here in Hong Kong with 2 kids. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And he snapped back at her, I love my wife. And so, you know, it's just one of those things where, yes, it can all be true.
Absolutely.
I have this woman that I'm deeply attracted to and have feelings for, and I love my wife.
It can happen.
Yes.
Surprise.
That's real life.
That's real life. Absolutely.
It's complicated here on Earth.
It is complicated. If I can have many friends that I have deep connections with, why is it different when it comes to a lover, a love interest?
Exactly.
Why is that different? You can absolutely have that. Now, it doesn't mean that every person is going to do that. You just need to find, if that's not cool with you, you need to find somebody who's dedicated to being loyal to just one person.
Yes.
Because there's all kinds of people, you know.
Yes.
So there's some people who need to have more than one experience with different people. And there's some people who just really enjoy monogamy. You know, they just enjoy being with one person.
And when you look at Bruce's astrological code, he's a Sagittarius rising, which means that his descendant is in Gemini.
Oh, well, there you go.
The descendant is the house of marriage.
Yeah.
So that means in terms of marriage and relationships, he is curious. Gemini is the sign of curiosity. So for him to stray to this woman, that woman, the next woman, however many women, but still be in love with his wife makes absolutely total sense, because his Venus is in Scorpio, which is fixed, which is loyal, but it's also the sign of secrets. So it's like, yes, I'm in love with my wife. I'm committed to my wife, but I'm also with this woman or that woman or whatever woman. It's none of your fucking business.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's between me and the women that I'm with. That's it. So sorry, 1970, whatever, you know, rules and regulations of Earth, you know, I mean, it
does not apply to him.
No.
It doesn't apply to a lot of people.
Well, and it shouldn't apply to anyone, because that's not how we're made. That's some other construct that's been created to control people.
Absolutely.
So.
Yep. And let's not get it twisted. Like, he wasn't like over analyzing and overthinking because he felt bad about, you know, having this other connection with this other woman. And in his words, he said, I did not like lying to my wife. He didn't like the lying part. It wasn't that he felt bad about what he did, because he said, I'm a good man, but it didn't feel like a mistake. It might have been a mistake. It didn't feel like a mistake because he was playing out something that needed to be played out. They needed to connect in this time on Earth together, him and this woman, Betty. They needed to do that. So because of these like constructs of society, at some point he felt like maybe he should just end his marriage, which is why the thought of leaving his wife came up. Linda came up. That's the only reason. It wasn't like...
It was because of society.
Because of, well, maybe I should just...
Societal norms, rules.
Leave my wife then, because if I'm having this strong draw and attraction to this woman. But actually, after having that conversation with his wife, she was the one that was like, look, you know, just because this is your soulmate, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is partnership. Partnership is about support and stability and, you know, somebody you can bounce ideas off of. And that's who I am.
Yes.
And we work well together in that capacity. Now, I don't think she was giving him like a full permission slip to go out and do whatever, but she also wasn't ready to leave the marriage, you know, so she was... You know, like I said, she was just this elevated being that was able to understand where her husband was coming from.
She was committed to him.
She was committed to him.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I'm seeing with him and Betty is that they had some past life stuff. I see them as children. They're coming in as children in their past lives. Probably, I would say no older than 6. And these children were soulmates. I mean, they weren't having sex or anything like that, but they just were soulmates. Like, they came in, and I don't see them living past like the age of 8 or 10. I think something might have happened where they died suddenly and came back and reunited. And that's why the connection was just so crazy.
Yes.
So they needed to play out some more things, and they'll probably continue playing it out over and over and over again. They'll probably continue doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing. It's relationships end because someone dies or there's a breakup, but they never end.
Yeah.
Because if there's unfinished business, then you'll meet again in the next life or the life after that or the life after that.
And who knows, she might, I mean, he passed on early this time. She may be the one that passes on early next time. And maybe the next time after that, they might be able to play it out for a little bit longer. But they died as children, came back around this time, kind of had that intense connection. And then he left. He died. And now, who knows, the next time around, it might be her turn to go. Yes. I don't know 100%. Sure. I'm just kind of putting it together. It makes sense, logically.
But they're learning lessons from each other.
Lessons.
That's what the soulmate is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is we're in a contract with each other to grow through our relationship.
Absolutely. So he also talks about that this made him want to study soulmates, actually, because he was very interested after having that conversation with his wife and kind of realizing, I get the feeling she was the one that was just like, this is your soulmate, type of a thing. And then he got interested in it, because what I'm getting from Bruce is that when something was mind-boggling to him, he needed to get to the bottom of it. Like, he needed to understand.
Well, that's being a Sagittarius and a Sagittarius rising. Sagittarius is the philosopher.
Yeah, don't tell me about it.
And so, yeah, you're a Sagittarius rising. So Bruce Lee, he identified himself as a philosopher. And I mean, you can go on the internet and just read quote after quote after quote after quote after quote of Bruce Lee, of like all these deep thoughts that he articulated either in an interview or it was written somewhere. Yes. Absolutely. Big thinker. Yeah.
Well, which explains the tension headaches. Thinking, going deeper and deeper. And it was just like, okay.
Yes.
So he needed to get to the bottom of that.
The headaches. So we haven't even brought this up yet, but the North Node, South Node. His South Node was in Aries. Aries rules the head.
Interesting.
And his South Node, North Node were in the 10th house, 4th house. His North Node was in the 10th house, about achievement, career, ambition. So he was writing that one very well. But the North Node is in Libra, which is about partnership, which is about negotiating. It's about being graceful with the way that you negotiate and connect with other people. And that's something that Bruce Lee wasn't.
Yeah.
Especially towards the end. He was, at least in the book, they talk about several instances. And this was something that, when he was a kid, he pulled a knife on a PE instructor.
So awesome. I love that. How old was he?
Oh, God. I think he was probably 12 or 13. He got expelled from his school and they had to get him into another school. And then part of the reason why he came to the United States was because he had beat up some kid who was like the son of somebody in power. It might have been a British person or whatever. And the police came to his parents' house and was like, look, your son is in trouble all the time. Next time, he's going to jail. So
he's cracking up laughing right now, by the way. I just see him holding his belly and his head laughing. He's
so this
cracking
is the thing
up
with
laughing
his
right
temper,
now. Yeah.
And I mean, there's multiple anecdotes in this book about his temper, and people that were close to him, like friends, people that trained with him, his students, they were afraid of him, because of his temper. Yeah. There's this karate champion, Mike Stone, had approached Bruce Lee when they were working on this film called The Wrecking Crew. Bruce Lee was doing the fight coordinating on this film, and he invited a couple of his students, karate buddies of his. And this guy, Mike Stone, was like, hey, I'm hearing from other people that you're telling people that you trained me. That, he's like, I was a karate champion before I met you. And Bruce Lee was like, really? Okay. Is that what you think? So you think I haven't helped you? I haven't helped you become a better fighter? Is that what you're telling me? He's like, well, I'm just, he like totally kind of backpedaled this and that, and was like, could tell he was getting him upset. I mean, they were rooming with each other on this film.
Oh, wow.
And Bruce did not like that. And like he cut him out of his life after that and never invited him back on any films or anything like that.
Wow.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes. There was this other guy, Joe Louis, who is another karate champion. His wife had done Bruce's hair. She was a hairstylist and came back and said that Bruce had made a pass at her. And so he came over to Bruce's house all angry. And Bruce was like, do you believe her? He's like, Linda, come here right now and listen to what he's telling me. And he realized that he'd made a mistake, that his wife had put him in these compromising positions before because she wanted him all to herself and didn't want him with his friends. But Bruce wrote down in his notebook that he's out too.
Oh my goodness.
So he was the type of person. That's what Venus in Scorpio is all about.
Okay.
Like when you give yourself in a relationship, when you have Venus in Scorpio, like Bruce Lee, you give 110%.
Yeah.
And if somebody ever disrespects you, then it's like, or they manipulate you or they betray you in some way, that's it. It's over. And there's name after name after name in this book, former students that crossed him at one point in time where he cut them out. Even to a degree, Steve McQueen, who was like one of Bruce Lee's students. Bruce Lee really looked up to him. And Steve McQueen was the biggest star in Hollywood. Bruce was working on this film with Sterling Silliphant, who was an Academy Award-winning screenwriter of the film In the Heat of the Night and one of Bruce Lee's students, along with Steve McQueen. And Bruce wanted to write this script with Sterling Silliphant. This is before he's a big star in Hong Kong and all these movies were coming out. And Steve McQueen was like, dude, this is for you. This is a star. And I'm not in this business to help other people ride my coattails. And basically bounced him out. And Bruce was just like, fuck you, I'm never going to, like not to his face, but like apparently when they left, he was like, I'm going to be a bigger star than Steve McQueen and fuck him, and just like everything. But that just put him on like this hell-bent sort of
that's the dedication.
The dedication that I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I'm a bigger star than Steve McQueen. So... and he did it.
And listen, there is something in that kind of drive, like to find your fire in that. It's something in that because it worked. You know what I mean?
And that's why it's so confusing to me with the North Node, because on one hand, he was living in his North Node's purpose by the 10th house energy, which is achievement. But on the other hand, he had so much anger and rage, which is the South Node in Aries. Yeah. So I'm just wondering if there was a way for him to be more patient, to be a little more graceful with the disagreements, to finesse things a little more, rather than intimidate and be so aggressive in certain situations. Because it sounded like when he died, he was under a tremendous amount of stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it was because of that, because he was trying to do everything on his own. Even in the movie Enter the Dragon, after the American crew had left and gone back to the States, he continued filming on his own different scenes, which are very important to be in the film. Don't get me wrong. And one of the things that Bruce Lee fought for was getting the title Enter the Dragon. Like the Warner Brothers and the producers, they did not want Enter the Dragon to be the title. They wanted some other forgettable title that I can't even remember off the top of my head. I mean, it's Enter the Dragon. That's a badass name. Yeah. He fought for that. But at the same time, I'm just like, are there other areas where, he could have asked for help, trusted other people to help him?
Well, I think that he was born with all of that fire. This was him through and through.
Totally.
However,
he exactly lived the life he was meant to live.
Absolutely.
When you look at Mars squaring Pluto and then the South Node in Aries, you're like, well, he's gonna be angry. He's gonna explode. It doesn't matter that it's his South Node, and even more so that it is his South Node, because we tend to gravitate towards our South Node anyway. But continue what you were saying.
Absolutely. What you're saying about the stress and everything like that, there was a lot of tension, anxiety, things like that happening around the time that he died. And also I pulled some cards around his death, and what came up was soulmates, 1, unfinished symphony, building blocks, regeneration, and a change in the wind.
Okay.
Yeah. So I immediately saw that's when the whole soulmates thing came up with this woman. Okay. Which makes sense now that I think about the past life tie and things like that. And it's interesting that he died
in her apartment.
Because again, that's that past life connection between them. But there was this anxiety, this like going over things, this rumination happening. And that makes sense, that what you said about his South Node being in Aries. This might have been the thing that held him back in some respects, because eventually the head is what took him out of here.
Exactly.
Wherever you're holding the most tension, wherever you're feeling the most pain. I know he had that back injury, but if you think about back injuries, they do affect the head as well.
Yes.
And I'm not sure where his back injury was exactly. Was it lower back?
So he injured his fourth sacral nerve permanently. So what happened is he placed a 125-pound barbell on his shoulders and bent over from the waist while keeping his back straight.
Ooh.
A good morning exercise, quotes. So on this particular day, for whatever reason, Bruce failed to warm up properly and something snapped in his back. Final diagnosis was he had injured his fourth sacral nerve permanently. So that's lower back.
Okay. That's what I figured.
And it's interesting because Libra, which is where his North Node is, it rules the kidneys. So to me, this is a sign right here. Like, you need to slow down. Stop trying to do everything on your own. Stop putting so much weight on your shoulders. But part of the other South Node energy that he wasn't adhering to for his North Node is overextending himself.
Yeah.
And that's that Sagittarius energy. He had great belief in himself, but it's ruled by Jupiter.
Yeah.
Jupiter is the planet of luck and expansion. So, but it can also expand the debt as much as it can expand the bank account. And he had a lot of debt. It seemed like in reading the book, he was always overextended, always living beyond his means, always, just pressing as opposed to like saving for a rainy day. He didn't do that. And that's why when the back injury came, Linda had to go to work and get a minimum wage job because they had so many bills because he seemed to always be living beyond his means.
Okay, so a couple of things that you said about Libra ruling the kidneys.
The kidneys, yes.
So the kidneys is also a place where we hold anger. Yeah.
Yep.
Very fiery energy, so it can live in the kidneys.
Yes.
And then the lower back usually represents some stability issues around stability, and also issues around the father. So remember, we talked earlier about how Dad had this inner kind of turmoil thing going on. That energy can be transferred over to the child. So if that's not tackled, it shows up in the body. And it showed up in Bruce's life, how he dealt with people and how he was so quick to write people off, and also it was rooted in anger. So and people don't understand that accidents are also the body's way of saying, hey, we need to tap into this. We need to check in with your emotions a little bit. That's also the body's way of saying it. So it may not necessarily always happen like from an illness or a medical condition that starts within the body. It can be an accident that happens outside, but everything is energy.
Exactly. There are no accidents.
There are no accidents.
There's a reason why that happened.
Exactly.
It was a wake-up call.
The body is going to find a way to say, hey, hello.
Yes.
Let's pay attention over here,
Yes.
And then on top of that, anything that happens in the spinal column totally affects what's happening up in the head.
Yes.
It can
It's all
affect
connected.
neck pain, headaches, things like that. So if he was having ruminating things happening in his head, plus dealing with a back injury that's associated to past events or just sometimes carrying over from a past life as well, all of these things can absolutely affect your life as well as your death.
Yep. Wow.
But he did say his death was an accident. He said it was an accident.
Of course. I mean, as opposed to like him being murdered or something like that. I mean, he took some aspirin and there was some sort of allergic reaction. Yeah. But in the book, it talks about that he had his, like the sweat ducts of his armpits taken out because he didn't like the way he looked on film sweating.
Okay.
So he had these, and it's just so crazy to me.
That's really ambitious
to have that taken out of your body so you don't sweat under the arms. And is he laughing?
He's holding his head like this, like, why did I do that? Now it's like, why did I do that? Yeah. That's what he's just doing. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Like that kind of a thing.
And it was like the hottest day of the year.
Yeah.
And so that might have had something, or at least in the book, that's what this author, in conjunction with talking to several doctors, they concluded that it was heat exhaustion, which is a common way for athletes to die. I mean, we see it on the football field all the time. It seems like every year there's a high school player, a college player, or, it's even been NFL players that have died when they're training in like August and September in the heat and just exerting themselves too much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you're dehydrated, that's going to create a headache.
Absolutely.
And so then you take a pill to relieve the headache, but it doesn't relieve the dehydration. And all of it
it's inflammation.
It's inflammation.
The brain gets inflamed and on top of the emotional stuff that's happening already.
Well, and he's running from that.
Absolutely.
He's running from the emotions. And when you talk about the soulmate stuff, I want to tap on that a little bit because I didn't mention that his Chiron, which is the wound and the ancient wisdom that is unlocked through healing that wound, his Chiron was in the 8th house, which is the house of death. That's that Scorpio bonded energy, the past life connections, inadequate in that way, in some way, shape, or form. And then it was also in Leo. It was in Leo, which is an inadequacy or an insecurity to his personal sovereignty, believing that he was enough is enough, as opposed to needing to show everybody that, look at how great I am, just understanding that, I'm great and no one else really needs to know. I know it myself. And it's also in a direct alignment, the same degree as his Venus in Scorpio squaring off. So this is a very difficult alignment. Relationships, karmic bonds, sovereignty, deep insecurity, and a wound in that area.
Wow. Yeah, and that makes sense because the other cards that I pulled was Unfinished Symphony. Right after Soulmates came Unfinished Symphony, which lets me know that they're gonna play this stuff out over and over again. Building blocks. The building blocks means that he kind of built his life off of this energy, this anger energy, this determination, this dedication energy, which worked out for him in the overall grand scheme of things, but it was also kind of his downfall as well. And then the next card that comes out is regeneration. What I'm picking up on is like the cells needing to regenerate and crying out for time. We just need time to. That's probably why the back injury happened, because the body was like, please let us rest, let us regenerate, let us get grounded again, and then you can go and do things. But when you're pushing, against the grain, eventually what happens is going to catch up. And what happens is you go through a regeneration through death.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because we do regenerate in the death process. And then a change in the wind. It changed everything. It changed. That was his life shifting and changing due to a lot of past life stuff, a lot of things that was passed down to him in the womb as a child. Mm-hmm. And then him kind of just, coming out the gate, this fighter, this heavy-weighted energy of like light and fun, but also like ferociousness. Like this, he truly lived the dragon life, And in some parts of his life, it was more of an elevated type of energy that was leading him. But he was also being heavily ruled by his lower self, too.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Completely.
Yeah.
So, but what does that mean, a change in the wind? Does that mean he's going to change in the next life?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, the change in the wind. You know what? I don't think he is. Mm-hmm. I think he's still hanging out over there. Yeah. I don't get the feeling that he has come back yet.
Right.
That doesn't mean that he won't.
Sure.
But he just hasn't yet.
Mm-hmm.
Is Betty passed over yet?
No.
Okay.
She's
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes.
So he may be waiting for her and then he'll come back as that.
Twin flame.
I think that's why he hasn't quite made that. Same thing with Brandon.
Yeah. He's waiting for his.
He's waiting for his too. Yeah. So it's very interesting.
Yes.
But the change in the wind was that shift in being here on planet Earth and then shifting out into that other state of being on the other side. That was the wind of change. If you're not going to change while you're down here, guess what? You're going to change when you're not down here.
Right. Yes. Okay, Bruce.
Confirmation, I guess. Yeah, he's like, I'm out of here. So that's what I'm picking up on, the change in the wind, because it changed everything when he left.
Yes,
it changed his life. It changed his children's lives, his wife's life. It changed probably Betty's life. Everybody who was close to him and loved him. It changed everything.
Yes,
totally changed everything.
Yes.
And it changed his existence from being human to going back into spirit form. But he did say, because I asked him what was his death related to. First, I asked him, did he ever use drugs? Mm-hmm. Because drugs was before I even knew how he died, drugs kept coming up. And I was like, okay, did you ever use drugs? And he was like, yeah. And I said, well, what kind did you use?
Yes.
But he admitted that he has tried, he's tried like cocaine and weed and things. He wasn't addicted to anything, but he had tried it, When he first started working in Hollywood, he tried a little bit of it. But ultimately, those drugs didn't contribute to his death. He was not a heavy recreational drug user like that. But, if you're in the industry, you may every now and again try a little bit of that, I guess.
I mean, who in Hollywood didn't try cocaine or weed in the 60s?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, according to the book, he did use weed more regularly. Okay. But I don't even think of that as a drug.
No.
It's an herb that you smoke or
absolutely eat. Yeah, it didn't come up as like a heavy drug user like that, but he was like, I tried some of that. But he did say that his death was
contributed to a drug.
Yeah, drugs absolutely contributed to his death, which was the Equagesic or NSAIDs, which is aspirin, and meprobamate, which is used for short-term pain treatment, accompanied by tension or anxiety, tension headaches, back injuries, things like that.
So on the day that he died, the Sun and Mercury were at the same degree. Mercury was retrograde. Mm-hmm. And Mercury is the planet that rules the conscious mind. Mm-hmm. They were both aligning to Neptune in his chart, which is the planet that represents drugs and alcohol, because it's the dreamy planet.
Yeah.
His North Node was in alignment with Jupiter, expanding the North Node as in like, hello, this is your soul's purpose. If you can't see it now, forever hold your peace. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the North Node was squaring his North Node. Mm-hmm. So, and it had been for the last few months. that can be a difficult transit of having to really being tested in terms of where you're directing your energy. And he was directing it towards his south node with the anger, with the do it myself. I don't need anyone's help. I'm just going to do it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I see that as a somewhat contributing factor. And then Neptune transiting over his sun. So his identity in alignment at almost the same degree as the planet that rules drugs and alcohol.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
the Sun and Mercury were also moving through his 8th house, the house of death. And Saturn, the planet of limitation, was moving through his 7th house, the house of marriage, which can be difficult to deal with relationship energy during that period.
Yeah.
Hard work to be done.
Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting.
Yes.
Well, Bruce, good stuff.
Very good stuff.
It is.
This has been wonderful.
As
Shara,
always.
Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for all of your wisdom and for connecting with Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
A legend of our time. Wow. It was such a joy to comb back over his work and to read this book about him and to just reflect upon his astrological code. And I just have so much love for Bruce Lee and his life as a human being.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not easy here on Earth.
No, it isn't.
So,
it's not easy.
There is no fault
Not
to
at
anyone
all.
here.
No.
Everyone's doing the best that they can. And he obviously was. And I just felt heartbroken again that he was gone.
Yeah.
And just watching him on the screen and just seeing how electrifying he was. Just magnetic. It's that sun on the ascendant. It's like he's on the screen and you feel the warmth.
Yeah.
It's like being in the sun when you watch Bruce Lee or you hear him speak. An incredible human being. I
need to go and actually watch some of his movies now that
watch the movies.
We've completed our session with him. So
You'll
I will
enjoy
definitely
them.
do that.
You'll
I will
enjoy
definitely
them.
do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And anyone who hasn't seen his films that is listening to this, watch them.
Yeah.
The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon, Enter the Dragon.
Okay.
Watch those 4 films.
Okay.
Watch them in that order. That's what I did. That's how they came out.
Gotcha.
And it's like you see the progression of him and incredible human.
Yeah. Well, I can tell how incredible he was just from our communication and how enlightened he was here on this planet.
So
you know what I mean?
enlightened.
Very enlightened. Very beyond smart. Like it's not even smart or intelligent. It's just like an ascendant being, an elevated being.
In an interview he did with someone in the early 1970s when he was first becoming a huge star, this person asked him, like, you were born in California, you were raised in Hong Kong, you lived in America for 12 years, and now you're back in Hong Kong. Are you of the West? Are you of the East? And he's like, I'd like to think of myself as a human being.
Yeah.
We're all born under the same sky.
That's right.
And like, this is in the early 1970s. It's like, wow, this super enlightened.
Yeah.
And to think what he did over his life in the face of the racism and discrimination.
Yes.
And it wasn't just in America. It was also in Hong Kong. Because in Hong Kong, he wasn't full Chinese.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he was always like kind of this outsider, but brought everyone together because of it.
Yeah.
So truly honored.
Absolutely.
So,
and I'm sure that fed into the anger as well, having to deal with that crap,
for
you know,
sure.
like, which adds to the drive, adds to the dedication, proving people wrong. And, you know,
well,
power on, Bruce.
Power on, Bruce. Yes. Thank you, Bruce, for being here. Thank you, Shara.
Thank you, Scott,
You're
for always
welcome.
Doing your research and helping me know that I am on the right track with this stuff. So, because it can get a little like, oh my God, am I right? You know,
you're amazing, Shara.
Not that I'm doubting myself, but it's just, you know, when you're moving from the spirit realm, like, it's nice to know that you can kind of fact check and be like, okay,
That's
this makes
fun.
sense. That is the fun.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Until next time, Shara.
Until next time.
You've been listening to The Uncharted Territories, where we see the unseen in the world of matter. If you would like to support the podcast, subscribe.
We've talked a lot about the subconscious mind and the importance of healing our wounds from the past. As an energy healer and a certified hypnotherapist, I help people understand how the mind works so they can harness the energy of the subconscious and tap into their inner power and make those positive long-term changes in their lives. If you're ready to make that change, you can book a session with me by connecting at opendoorhypnosis.com. I look forward to working with you.
If you'd like to learn more about who you are, where you come from, why you're here, and what you're meant to do with your life, contact me, Scott Tejerian, at theweeklytransit.com, and we will take a close, detailed look at your astrological code. My purpose is to help you understand who you are so you can accept, appreciate, and love the divine, unique miracle that is you.